America's history of chasing perfection has produced some of the world's most spectacular failures. We're counting down 32 bizarre cults and utopian communities, from a group that tried to weaponize salad bars with salmonella to a prophet who kept his mother's corpse for years, feeding it crackers. This isn't just history. It's a catalog of glorious, real-life disasters. 1. If you thought your friend's gluten-free, paleo diet was extreme, allow me to introduce Fruitlands. Established in 1843 by Bronson Alcott, the father of Little Women author Louisa May, this Massachusetts commune wasn't just a community. It was a masterclass in agricultural absurdity. They were strict vegans who also banned animal labor, meaning the intellectuals had to pretend to be oxen and pull their own plows. They also rejected cotton and wool for ethical reasons. But the absolute pinnacle of their bonkers philosophy was the war on vegetables. They forbade any plant that grew downwards, like potatoes or carrots, deeming them spiritually inferior. Only aspiring foods that grew up towards the sky, like fruits and grains, were acceptable. This high-minded diet of apples and sunshine proved tragically insufficient for surviving a harsh New England winter. The grand utopian experiment starved itself into oblivion in just 7 months, a spectacular failure fueled by pure, fruit-based delusion. 2. Imagine your therapist's advice for your commitment issues is to leave your spouse, move into a commune, and start sleeping with other patients they select for you. Welcome to the Sullivanians. This New York City psychotherapeutic cult, thriving from the 1960s, was founded on the idea that the traditional family unit was the root of all evil. The cure? A therapeutic community where the therapists were the ultimate puppet masters, controlling relationships, careers, and even access to one's own children. Members were systematically isolated and broken down, becoming completely dependent on the group's leaders. It was a toxic brew of distorted Freudian theory and so-called sexual freedom, which really just meant freedom for the leaders to exploit everyone else. It was less a path to enlightenment and more a psychological prison, thankfully dismantled by waves of lawsuits and horrifying exposés. 3. Prepare for a spiritual workout, because we're talking about the Shakers. Officially known as the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, they earned their more famous nickname from their unique form of worship. Services involved members literally shaking, whirling, and dancing with wild abandon to cast off their sins, a practice that looked like a cross between a religious revival and a high-intensity aerobics class. Led by Mother Ann Lee, who arrived from England in 1774, the Shakers championed ideals like communal living and gender equality, which was revolutionary for the time. There was just one major catch for long-term survival. They were strictly celibate. This made recruitment, not reproduction, their only path to growth. While their population inevitably faded, their dedication to perfection and simplicity left behind an incredible legacy of minimalist furniture and agricultural inventions that are still admired today. 4. Long before other utopian dreamers were making a mess, a Welsh industrialist named Robert Owen gave it a shot with New Harmony, Indiana, in 1825. Owen bought an entire town with the grand vision of creating a new moral world based on cooperation and intellectualism, free from the evils of private property and social hierarchy. He successfully attracted a number of brilliant scholars and educators. Unfortunately, he also attracted a massive crowd of what one historian called vagrants and lazy theorists, people who were all in on the no-work part of utopia, but less enthusiastic about contributing. Despite founding some of America's first public schools and libraries, the community collapsed in just 2 years under the weight of internal squabbling and the simple fact that philosophical debates don't put food on the table. Owen learned the hard way that a paradise filled with people who don't want to work is just a really well-educated poorhouse. 5. Please secure all personal beliefs, as we are about to discuss the Nubian nation of Moors. This group was the fever dream of Dwight York, a man who collected aliases like they were baseball cards and whose theology was a blender mishap of cosmic proportions. In the 1990s, his followers built Tamaray, an ancient Egypt-themed compound in the middle of rural Georgia, featuring pyramids, sphinxes, and enough gold paint to make a pharaoh blush. York, who called himself Dr. Malachi Z. York, claimed to be a benevolent alien from the planet Risk. His teachings were a chaotic grab bag of Black Islamic nationalism, UFO conspiracies, Egyptian mythology, and whatever else he apparently saw on late-night cable. The cosmic party came to a crashing end when York was convicted on a staggering number of child molestation and racketeering charges, landing him a 135-year prison sentence. The pyramids are gone, but the legend of their sheer, unapologetic weirdness remains. 6. Synanon began as a groundbreaking drug rehabilitation program in 1958 and ended as a cautionary tale about how fast a good idea can curdle into a violent cult. Founded by Charles Dederick, its core practice was the game, a brutal form of group therapy where participants were encouraged to verbally savage each other to break down their egos. For a time, it had remarkable success. But as Dederick's power grew, so did his paranoia. Synanon morphed into a totalitarian community where members had to shave their heads, give up their assets, and were sometimes forced into vasectomies or abortions. The group even created its own paramilitary unit called the Imperial Marines. The absolute low point? When an attorney won a lawsuit against them, Synanon members tried to assassinate him by placing a de-rattled rattlesnake in his mailbox. Yes, a rattlesnake. It's a chilling reminder that the road to hell is sometimes paved with therapeutic intentions. 7. Welcome, Earthlings, to the Unarius Academy of Science, where the fashion is cosmic and the history is interplanetary. Founded in the 1950s by Ernest and Ruth Norman, who later preferred the title Archangel Uriel, Unarius is a California-based spiritual school dedicated to channeling wisdom from highly evolved space brothers. Their core mission is to prepare humanity for the eventual mass landing of a fleet of benevolent UFOs, who will usher in a golden age. Their primary method of outreach involves filming public access television shows and pageants, where members, dressed in spectacular, shimmering DIY costumes, reenact their supposed past lives on other planets. These productions are a glorious explosion of glitter, cosmic philosophy, and pure outsider art. While some might call them strange, the Unarians are still going strong, broadcasting their message of love and light from their interdimensional soapbox. They're less a failed utopia and more a successful, ongoing work of performance art. 8. Picture a socialist paradise. Now picture it in the middle of California's Mojave Desert with almost no access to water. That was the fundamental and frankly idiotic flaw of the Llano del Rio colony. In 1914, a socialist lawyer named Job Harriman convinced thousands of followers that this arid landscape was the perfect place to build a cooperative utopia. And for a moment, they thrived, building infrastructure and even printing their own money. They were a bustling city of dreamers in a place where nothing was supposed to grow. But they couldn't overcome two major obstacles: constant infighting among factions of socialists, and the fact that you can't build a large-scale agricultural society in a desert without a reliable water source. It was a fatal oversight. By 1918, the colony had collapsed, its fields turned back to dust. It stands as a monument to the idea that no amount of political idealism can make it rain. 9. Meet the Process Church of the Final Judgment, a group so stylishly grim they made the 1960s look like a funeral procession. Hailing from England but finding their footing in the US, these were the original Goths. Dressed in severe black robes and always accompanied by intimidating German shepherds, their look was as sharp as their theology. They didn't just pick one god, they diversified their divine portfolio. In their view, Christ, Lucifer, and Satan were all part of a necessary cosmic management team. This equal opportunity worship was explored in their beautifully designed but philosophically heavy magazines. Naturally, their dark aesthetic led to wild rumors linking them to criminals like Charles Manson, though these claims were never proven. The church eventually fractured, proving that even a perfectly balanced trinity of deities couldn't save them from internal politics. They were simply too bleak and beautiful to survive. 10. Then there's the infamous story of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. This apocalyptic sect was led by Vernon Howell, a charismatic musician who renamed himself David Koresh, believing he was a messianic figure. At the Mount Carmel compound, Koresh gathered his devoted followers, preaching that the end times were near. His teachings involved amassing a large cache of weapons and taking numerous spiritual wives, some of whom were teenagers. In February 1993, this volatile situation exploded when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to execute a search warrant for illegal firearms. The attempt resulted in a deadly gun battle, triggering a 51-day siege by the FBI. The standoff reached a horrific conclusion on April 19th when federal agents moved in with tear gas, and a fire rapidly consumed the compound. Nearly 80 people, including Koresh and over 24 children, died in the blaze, leaving behind a legacy of tragedy and fierce debate. 11. If you think our current understanding of the universe is complicated, allow me to introduce the Koreshan unity. After experiencing a spiritual vision, a man named Cyrus Teed declared himself the new Messiah, adopting the name Koresh. His central, mind-bending revelation was that humanity is living on the inside surface of a hollow earth. The sun, moon, and stars, all just illusions at the center of our concave reality. He and his followers moved to a Florida settlement to build a new Jerusalem and proved their inside-out cosmology with experiments that only made sense if you already believed them. Teed's followers were so convinced of his divinity that when he died, they preserved his body for several days, fully expecting him to resurrect. The only second coming, however, was a public health official who insisted the corpse be buried. It was a belief system that was fundamentally and literally upside down. 12. In the 1980s, a fleet of 93 Rolls-Royces descended upon the quiet plains of rural Oregon. This was Rajneeshpuram, the audacious utopia of Indian guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, later known as Osho. His followers, dressed exclusively in shades of red and orange, built a full-fledged city from scratch. But this wasn't about simple living. It was about lavish excess, with the fleet of luxury cars reserved for the guru's daily drive-by blessings. The local residents were, to put it mildly, not amused. Tensions escalated into a shocking campaign of domestic bioterrorism, where the cult's leadership, orchestrated by the formidable Ma Anand Sheela, poisoned local salad bars with salmonella in a plot to rig a local election. The scheme unraveled into a whirlwind of attempted murders, wiretapping, and arrests, causing the entire extravagant enterprise to collapse in a spectacular cloud of orange dust and federal indictments. 13. In Miami during the 1980s, the Nation of Yahweh presented itself as a force for Black empowerment and community revitalization. But behind this positive facade was a brutal and violent cult led by Hulon Mitchell Jr., who had rebranded himself Yahweh ben Yahweh, or God Son of God. He preached that he was the true Messiah and that his followers were the real Israelites. To enforce his power and test the loyalty of his inner circle, he allegedly created a death squad known as the Death Angels. These enforcers were ordered to murder dissenters and random white individuals, sometimes being required to bring back a body part as proof of the kill. The group's reign of terror, funded by extortion, ended when the FBI unraveled the conspiracy. Yahweh ben Yahweh was convicted of racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder, proving that even a self-proclaimed God has to answer to the law. 14. Heaven's Gate took the concept of a UFO cult to its tragic and logical conclusion. Led by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, who called themselves Do and Ti, the group believed that Earth was about to be recycled, and that their only chance of survival was to ascend to a next level of existence. They taught that their human bodies were merely disposable containers for their alien souls. Their escape plan was to hitch a ride on an alien spacecraft they believed was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet in 1997. In a suburban San Diego home, 39 members, including Applewhite, meticulously prepared for their departure. They were found deceased, dressed in matching black tracksuits, wearing brand new Nike sneakers, and covered with purple shrouds. They had ingested a lethal cocktail, leaving behind eerie and calmly delivered video messages explaining their final exit. It was a chilling final chapter for a group that truly believed they were just catching the next flight out of humanity. 15. In the early 20th century, a religious community in Michigan managed to combine piety with a mean fastball. This was the House of David, founded by Benjamin Purnell, who declared himself the seventh messenger of God. A key tenet of the faith was celibacy, and a refusal to cut one's hair or beard, which gave the male members a distinctly biblical look. While the followers were expected to remain chaste, Purnell himself was later embroiled in numerous scandals involving sexual relations with young women in the community. But the group's most famous legacy was its traveling baseball team. The bearded players were genuine sporting sensations, barnstorming across the country and playing against professional teams. They were a bizarre and fascinating mix of religious devotion, athletic prowess, and, ultimately, the classic cult leader hypocrisy that brought the whole enterprise into disrepute. 16. In the late 1600s, a group of German mystics called the Woman in the Wilderness settled near Philadelphia to prepare for the end of the world. Led by the scholar Johannes Kelpius, this all-male, celibate commune of intellectuals was deeply immersed in alchemy, numerology, and biblical prophecy. They were convinced the apocalypse would arrive in the year 1694. To ensure they had a front-row seat for the big event, they built a 40-foot square tabernacle, complete with a rooftop observatory, pointing their telescope to the heavens to watch for signs. But 1694 came and went with disappointingly little divine intervention. Undeterred, they simply decided their calculations were a bit off and continued to wait. Kelpius eventually died, still waiting for an apocalypse that never came. Without a leader or a cataclysm, the group simply faded into the history books, a quiet testament to the perils of apocalyptic scheduling. 17. Let's travel to Philadelphia for one of the most tragic and horrifying stories on this list, the MOVE organization. Founded by John Africa, MOVE was a radical back-to-nature collective that rejected technology and government authority. Living in a West Philadelphia row house, they became notorious for their confrontational tactics, broadcasting profanity-laced tirades through loudspeakers and creating unsanitary conditions that infuriated their neighbors. Tensions with the city escalated dramatically over the years, culminating in an absolute catastrophe in 1985. Following an armed standoff, the Philadelphia Police Department made a decision that is still shocking to this day. They dropped an explosive device from a helicopter onto the group's fortified home. The resulting fire was deliberately left to burn, killing 11 people inside, including 5 children, and wiping out 61 neighboring houses. It was a horrifying event, where a conflict with a fringe group ended with the city firebombing its own neighborhood. 18. In the pantheon of cult leaders with big egos, Father Divine stands alone. Born George Baker, he didn't just hint at divinity, he flat-out declared himself to be God Almighty. And starting in the 1920s, his peace mission movement gained a massive following. Believers, known as his angels, would live in communal homes called heavens, surrender all their possessions, and practice strict celibacy, even if they were already married. In return, they got to attend Father Divine's legendary free banquets. Of course, these lavish feasts were funded entirely by the free labor and donations of his followers. To his credit, he was a vocal proponent of racial equality, a genuinely radical stance for the time. But the whole "I am the literal creator of the universe" claim tended to dominate his resume. When he finally passed away in 1965, the movement struggled, proving the inconvenient truth that even God has to deal with mortality. 19. Next, we visit the Fountain Grove community in California, a utopia that successfully blended spiritual searching with commercial winemaking. This 19th century commune was the brainchild of Thomas Lake Harris, a poet and mystic who claimed to receive instructions from angels. He preached a doctrine of divine respiration and spiritual unions, while conveniently exempting himself from the celibacy required of his followers. Harris had a gift for attracting wealthy patrons who eagerly handed over their fortunes to fund his Brotherhood of the New Life. This allowed him to establish a hugely successful winery in Sonoma County. So while followers were busy contemplating the higher planes of existence, they were also producing some of the region's finest vintages. Eventually, Harris's dictatorial control and financial scandals led to the community's collapse. But the vineyards endured, proving that while utopian ideals may wither, a good Cabernet has staying power. 20. Brace yourself, because this one is uniquely disturbing. Meet the Blackburn cult, which operated under the absurdly long name, the Divine Order of the Royal Arms of the Great 11. In the 1920s, leader May Otis Blackburn claimed to be the chosen mouthpiece for the angels Gabriel and Michael. Her divine revelations promised followers wealth and immortality. The cult's descent into madness reached its peak with the death of a member named Willa Rhodes. Blackburn convinced the woman's family that she would be resurrected if her body was properly preserved. For the next several years, they kept Rhodes's corpse in a makeshift coffin, pickling it with salt and spices and attempting to feed it milk and crackers through a tube. The whole grotesque secret was discovered only when another follower's suspicious death led investigators to the house. It was a ghoulish saga of manipulation and a truly macabre interpretation of eternal life. 21. Now for a commune that traded comfort for creativity, the Ephrata Cloister. Founded in 18th century Pennsylvania by German mystic Conrad Beissel, this community embraced a life of extreme self-denial. They practiced celibacy, ate a sparse vegetarian diet, and, most punishingly, slept only a few hours a night on hard wooden benches, using wooden blocks as pillows. The goal was to mortify the flesh to elevate the spirit. But out of this harsh, uncomfortable existence came breathtaking works of art. The cloister became famous for its complex and beautiful a cappella choral music and for its masterfully intricate calligraphy style known as Fraktur. They were a testament to artistic creation fueled by ascetic devotion. However, like so many other celibate communities, their rigid principles were their own undoing. With no new members being born into the group, their pious and artistic society slowly faded away. 22. Introducing the Harmony Society, also known as the Rappites, another group of German immigrants who were absolutely convinced that celibacy was the key, and the second coming of Christ was right around the corner. Led by the charismatic and authoritarian George Rapp, these industrious pietists were workhorses of utopianism. They established 3 incredibly successful towns, moving from Pennsylvania to Indiana, and then back to Pennsylvania. In a fun twist of history, the town they built in Indiana was so well made that it was later purchased by Robert Owen for his own New Harmony experiment. The Rappites became wealthy through agriculture and manufacturing, even producing a highly regarded whiskey. But they overlooked one critical element for long-term success: procreation. Being strictly celibate, their society was a ticking demographic time bomb that finally went off, leaving behind a legacy of economic success and biological failure. 23. Welcome to Holy City, California, a place founded in the 1920s that was neither holy nor much of a city. It was the bizarre roadside kingdom of William E. Riker, a con man who called himself the Comforter and claimed to be the wisest man on earth. His utopia, nestled in the Santa Cruz Mountains, was essentially a tourist trap designed to spread his racist, white supremacist ideology and to separate fools from their money. The town was plastered with strange hand-painted signs, ran a radio station for Riker's bigoted sermons, and even featured a peep show for curious travelers. He promised his handful of followers that he was a divine messenger who would make them rich, but he was the only one who profited. After Riker's death, Holy City crumbled into a creepy, dilapidated ghost town, a perfect monument to a utopia built on pure hatred and ego. 24. let's talk about the Church Universal and Triumphant, or CUT for short. This New Age organization, led by the charismatic Elizabeth Clare Prophet, went all in on doomsday prepping in the late 1980s. Prophet, who claimed to be channeling messages from ascended masters, became convinced that a nuclear war with the Soviet Union was imminent. She instructed her thousands of followers to move to Montana and prepare for the end of the world. They spent millions of dollars constructing a massive network of underground bomb shelters near Yellowstone National Park, stocking them with food, water, and, of course, weapons. They dug in, put on their survival gear, and waited for the missiles to fly in the spring of 1990. When the apocalypse failed to show up, it led to a period of intense disappointment and disillusionment. The church survived, but their reputation as accurate prophets took a major, cut. 25. Allow me to introduce Adonai Shomo, a small but potentially strange cult from 19th century Massachusetts. Its leader, Frederick T. Sanford, decided he wasn't just a regular guy. He was the literal reincarnation of the prophet Elijah. And a surprising number of local farming families actually believed him. They all moved onto a communal property called the Lord's Farm, where Sanford promised to perform miracles like healing the sick and controlling the weather. His most notable divine power, however, was his implementation of spiritual wifery, a convenient doctrine that allowed the prophet to have multiple partners. It seems that even Old Testament prophets, when reincarnated, develop a keen interest in theological loopholes that benefit their love lives. Like many similar ventures, the community dissolved shortly after Sanford's death, when it became clear that this version of Elijah wasn't going to be resurrecting anytime soon. 26. From the bell-bottomed heart of the 1960s, counterculture comes the Love Family. This Seattle-based hippie commune was led by a man who swapped his given name, Paul Erdman, for the much groovier Love Israel. All his followers followed suit, adopting the surname Israel and dedicating themselves to a life of communal sharing and pacifism. They were a well-known part of the city's fabric, easily recognizable by their rainbow-colored clothing. They subsisted largely on food recovered from supermarket dumpsters, a practice they elegantly termed gathering God's abundance. For a time, the model of peace, love, and recycled pastries worked. But eventually, the utopian dream buckled under the weight of internal conflicts and the logistical nightmare of managing a large, unconventional family. It turned out that good vibes alone couldn't solve every problem, proving that even in a family named Love, disputes happen. 27. Let's visit the Fountain of the World, a California cult whose story ends with a literal bang. It was founded by Krishna Venta, a man with a criminal record and a flair for the dramatic, who claimed he was Jesus Christ, but a version of Jesus from another planet called Neophrates. His followers, dressed in simple robes, established a community in Box Canyon, where they gained local respect for their volunteer firefighting efforts. But behind the scenes, Venta was allegedly misappropriating funds and engaging in sexual relationships with female members of the group. In 1958, two disillusioned ex-members decided they'd had enough of his hypocrisy. They packed a significant amount of dynamite, walked into the main building during a meeting, and detonated it. The explosion killed Venta and 9 others, bringing a violent and definitive end to his extraterrestrial messianic mission. 28. Welcome to the Oneida Community, a 19th century New York experiment that took the concept of family and twisted it into a pretzel. Led by the radical theologian John Humphrey Noyes, the community rejected traditional monogamy in favor of a system called complex marriage. This meant that every man was considered married to every woman, and vice versa. It was a highly structured system of communal relationships, governed by strict rules to manage jealousy and attachment. To prevent a population explosion, they practiced a form of birth control called male continence. As if that weren't enough, they also engaged in a selective breeding program they called stirpiculture, aiming to create spiritually superior children. Amid all this radical social engineering, they somehow found the time to become one of America's leading manufacturers of silverware. The sexual utopia eventually collapsed, but the spoons and forks they made are still on dinner tables today. 29. Brook Farm was what happened when a group of 19th century America's most brilliant minds decided to run a farm, and it was a spectacular disaster. Founded in 1841 by transcendentalist George Ripley, the Massachusetts commune attracted intellectual superstars like Nathaniel Hawthorne. The goal was to create a perfect balance between manual labor and intellectual pursuit. The problem was that these philosophers, poets, and writers were utterly incompetent farmers. They could compose a beautiful sonnet about a sunset, but had no idea how to actually grow a crop. The community was plagued by financial instability, and ultimately a devastating fire destroyed their main building. The grand experiment in high-minded agriculture failed in less than 6 years, serving as a hilarious and timeless reminder that being a genius in one field doesn't mean you won't be a complete idiot in another. 30. Step into the groovy, incense-filled world of the Source family, a Hollywood cult from the 1970s. The group was led by the charismatic and impressively bearded Father Yod, a former stuntman who became a spiritual guru. His followers ran one of the most popular health food restaurants on the Sunset Strip, serving vegetarian cuisine to rock stars and celebrities. Father Yod preached a philosophy of natural living, had 13 spiritual wives, and fronted a psychedelic rock band called Yah-Ho-Wah 13. The whole operation was a perfect storm of hippie ideals and Hollywood glamour. The dream came to an abrupt end after the family relocated to Hawaii. In a deeply ironic twist, Father Yod, the man who claimed to have transcended earthly limitations, died in a hang-gliding accident. His unceremonious crash landing was a stark reminder that even self-proclaimed gods are subject to the laws of physics. 31. Let's explore the bizarre and short-lived kingdom of Matthias from the 1830s. This operation was run by Robert Matthews, a carpenter who declared himself Matthias the Prophet and claimed to be the living embodiment of the Spirit of Truth. His version of the truth was a chaotic mix of Old Testament law and his own self-serving decrees, which included a strict ban on shaving for his followers, though not for himself. He attracted a small group of wealthy followers who funded his communal kingdom. As with so many prophets of his ilk, his reign was marked by financial exploitation and the practice of taking spiritual wives. The kingdom crumbled under the weight of legal troubles, including accusations of murder, for which he was acquitted, and a conviction for assaulting his own daughter. His divine mission ended not with a bang, but with a jail sentence and total disgrace. 32. Our final stop is the farm, a legendary hippie commune founded in Tennessee in 1971. It began when spiritual teacher Stephen Gaskin led a caravan of school buses filled with hundreds of his followers from San Francisco into the rural South. For years, it was the embodiment of the counterculture dream, a massive, self-sufficient community based on shared resources, vegetarianism, and pacifist principles. The farm became a world-renowned center for natural childbirth, thanks to the pioneering work of Gaskin's wife, Ina May. At its peak, over 1,000 people lived there. But the purely communal economic model proved unsustainable. By the 1980s, facing bankruptcy, the community underwent the changeover, abandoning the collectivist economy for a more traditional system where families were responsible for their own income. The farm still exists today, but as a more conventional community, a living monument to both the beautiful ideals and the practical failures of pure utopianism. That's 32 tales of American idealism going completely off the rails. But we know this is just the tip of the iceberg. The real question is, what did we miss? What's the one absolutely insane local cult or forgotten commune from your state's history that we were too ignorant to include? Expose our blind spots in the comments. And if you appreciate this kind of historical weirdness, you know what to do. Like and subscribe.